Hello, this is Jennifer Vanderbeek with scrapsoflife.com, and for today's project I've got a mixed media journal featuring Faber-Castell Pitt Artist Pens, Texture Luxe Paste, and Gelatos. Okay, so to start my book, I've got a few different materials here for the pages. I've got some maps that I have just trimmed down, and some wallpaper sheets, just, from the sample books and stuff, that, again, I've cut down to about the same size as the envelopes. Then I've got some old vintage newspapers. These happen to be Wild West themed. Go figure. And then I have two types of envelopes. Now, the white envelopes are what are comprising my main signatures here, and there's 2 envelopes per signature, and the way I've built these is by nesting them together, taking one flap, fitting it into the envelope into the inside of the other flap so that their folds line up, and then you have one spare flap on the outside that inside the book will create an easy spot to tip things in or make a little overlay or tab or tag. Just fun. Now, I am nesting the 3 envelope signatures together, but I'm flipping them around a little bit so that the spare flaps there are not all on the same side, you see? So they're, a little bit more interesting this way. And then, that could be the book on its own, just an envelope book. But I wanted a cover, so I have these Kraft envelopes from 7 Gypsies that I did the same things to, only this time I glued down the flap on the outside. So I'm going to use that as the cover. And yeah, it's not the same size, but that's okay. It's actually going to look kind of neat by the time we're done. So now I want to start putting the book together, and I've started speeding it up because this whole process took about an hour start to finish, and nobody's got time to actually sit here and watch me do that. So we're going to speed things up periodically. And all I'm doing is I am nesting the different page elements all together, just kind of random. There's no real set order. I'm just trying to get a good variety throughout the book. And there's our book block. Now, this is a single signature book, so it's going to be very simple and straightforward to put together. Make sure your spine is all lined up, all your folds are nested in one another, and then take an awl or a piercing tool or whatever you have, or you could even use a craft knife carefully, and about every inch or so, poke a hole through the inside of the spine to the outside. Now, ideally, if you poke the hole through the spine on the inside, it will be on the spine on the outside, but that's not always the case. So sometimes you have to go in and kind of neaten things up on the other side. You could also start from the outside and go in. It's personal preference how you want to go ahead and do that. Just make sure you've got holes all the way down the spine. Now, I'm going to use a curved upholstery needle and some waxed button thread. This is what I use on most of my bookbinding projects, and you could totally use a straight needle for this, but I find that the curved needle works really well when I'm doing multiple signature books, and so that's the one I keep that threaded and ready to go for whenever I get the hankering to stitch another book together, which, it happens periodically. So, just kind of go in and out along the holes that you've punched down the spine of the book. And then when you get to the opposite end from where you started, you're going to come back around the other way. So you'll have a solid line of stitches both inside and out, which is different than when you would be doing a single signature book or a multiple signature book, but this is how this book is coming together. So when I get to back to where I started, then I'm just going to tie a double knot followed by a single knot. I find this to be much more secure, and then trim off my ends. You could leave the ends long if you wanted, to use that as a feature. I didn't, so I just, trimmed them off at about half an inch or so. All right. And that's our book. That's our basic book. But of course you know that we're not just going to leave it a basic book, because otherwise, we'd be done now. And we've still got more video to go. No, I am going to decorate the book and I wouldn't say necessarily pretty it up, because it's going to be kind of an aged look by the time we're done, but this is what we're going to do. So what I've pulled together to start with for the cover, the front cover, I've got these little playing cards from a kid's game that I bought at Goodwill, I think. And so I've got some interesting little characters and shapes there. I've got some cast-off pieces of the same wallpaper borders that I used inside the book. And then I've got a strip of Pantone from an old Pantone book from work. Now I've got the natural set of the Faber-Castell Gelatos, the texture medium in silver, a palette knife, a brush, and my Liquitex matte gel medium, and another brush to go with that. Yes, there are other things you can use, but let me tell you that matte gel medium is quickly becoming my favorite thing ever, and you'll see why as we get further into the cover. Now I'm starting by just tearing out some portions of the wallpaper samples. Started with the brown, cut it to match the height of the book, and then did the same with the blue, and I'm just kind of arranging everything as I go. Now I'm going to fussy cut out the little card characters. I've got several animals. I've got the moon, and I think I've got a pair of scissors in here too that I set aside and I cut out, and then I didn't end up using the scissors because, you know, you just never know how things are going to go. This is kind of the boring part of the video, I admit. And as I'm cutting things out, I'm kind of deciding where I think they might go. And, you know, I don't think I cut out all the cards that I had pulled out. But, you know, you just cut out what you think you might like to use. And like this little dragon alligator dude right here turned out to be my favorite one. He was just kind of like sure, we'll use that. But I think he has the most character out of all the characters that I pulled for this. And I decided that since he kind of looks, you know, he reminded me a little bit of the Loch Ness Monster. So I tore another strip of the wallpaper border and gave him kind of a C to lay in, and then we used some leftover map pages that I had and made a little bit more of a background. And now I'm adhering, now that I have everything kind of more or less in place, I'm going to push it all to the side and give it a good coat of matte medium to glue it all down. Can you use a decoupage paste? Variety of brands are available on the market. Yes, you can. I will say that with a caveat, however, because I used to depend on decoupage pastes. And one thing that would happen, you know, I'm down in Florida, or actually no, I'm not in Florida anymore. I'm in Georgia now. But anyway, it's the South, and we have humidity issues. And some of the decoupage pastes, they never fully dry or cure down here, especially if you're working in the summer when you've got the high humidity. Another thing is the surface that they leave is a little different than the matte medium, and I was trying out another YouTuber's background technique, and she was using the gel medium, and I had not bought any of this stuff because let me tell you, it can be a little pricey. It is compared to decoupage paste. But I broke down, I bought a jar of it, and talk about art changing, like life-changing, art changing. I was so impressed with the difference in surface that it left behind and what I could do on that surface. So, yeah, big deal. Now, in this particular case, those little cards that I had where with the characters on them, I had done a test real quick to see if I could color the individual items with my Pitt artist pens, the brush pens you see right there. Yeah, it didn't really work because of the glossy surface. Going over everything with that matte medium suddenly I can draw on these. I can color. I can use markers on them, and it's not going to beat up. The color is going to stay where I put it. Life is good. So that is one major point, that and it glides, the color glides over the surface better than if I had used a decoupage paste. Now I have gotten out the gelatos here, and I am using the gray gelato to kind of give the moon some shade. And now I'm going to use the chocolate gelato to add a vignette, a feature on or effect onto the cover. You know, the vignette tool is my favorite thing on Instagram. I usually bump that all the way up on almost all the pictures I post on Instagram. It is by far my favorite thing. I don't use filters so much as I go in and I'll tweak the brightness or whatever, and then I will scroll all the way over to the vignette and add that in. Now, to blend out that chocolate gelato, I'm now adding the butterscotch right after it and smudging it with a little bit of water. And butterscotch and chocolate. I am now craving pudding. Anybody else? Okay. All right, now we're going to bring on the texture paste. This is the Texture Luxe in silver. And at first I thought, okay, I'm just going to add this to the moon because it's going to give him like a little bit of shimmer and shine, and that makes sense because he's the moon. But I was like, you know what? No, that's not enough. That's just not enough. And so I am using my palette knife to just go over the entire surface, more or less. I mean, I'm not covering everything up, but I am getting a good amount of coverage with that paste. And then I'm going to go in with just a paper towel, and I'm going to dab at the texture paste so that I'm lifting up little bits of it, and it's adding a little bit of, well, texture. It's roughing up the surface of the paste, and as I go on, I'm adding more with the paper towels. I'm rubbing it in, I'm taking it off, I'm lifting it off, just getting an overall look to it. Now, you might say, well, why did you go to all that effort to color in those figures when all you've done is cover it all up? Well, because you never really know what you're going to do with a project until you get in there and just try. One thing I also did was go over the whole cover with some more of the chocolate and butterscotch gelatos, and then smoothed them with water and picked it up to give it that aged patina look, and I really love the way it's turning out. I decided to add some fiber. I usually like to keep my journal covers pretty flat because if I'm writing on a page behind the cover, I don't want to have a lot of lumps and bumps. But for this one, I thought, you know, hey, we're going to go with it, and we're going to put a ribbon there. And then I decided to add some of the peach gelatos just to kind of brighten up some of the sections a little bit. I thought it was looking a smidge too dark, and this just kind of blends in what I've done overall. Now, it was actually the tying the little bow there was what kind of gave me the idea for the message that I'm going to put on here. But before I get to that, I am using the red brush pen from the Pitt Basics Artist Pen Set, and I am drawing a little bit of a border around the edge of the entire cover. I don't know if it's the time I spent in comics or what, but I think that everything looks better with a mat, a frame, or a border somewhere around it. And in this case, I decided one just wasn't enough, so I grabbed the burgundy color from the Landscape Pitt pen set and decided to make a second border. Now you see that I keep wiping off the brush nib as I'm going. The reason for that is because those layers of gelatos and stuff are a little bit clogging my pen, but the brush pen, you know, you just have to kind of smush it off onto a piece of spare paper or paper towel like I've got here, and it keeps going no problem. Now, The brush pens could get around that. The Pitt Artist pen in the bullet nib that I use for writing, yeah, I got about 3 letters in and it was clogged and I could not keep going. So, once again, I fixed things thanks to the matte medium. Now, when I first brushed it over the words, it of course, it smeared the ink because the ink wasn't set or anything. So I was able to just wipe it off with that paper towel and then give the entire cover a coating of the matte gel medium. And I was also able to use this as a bit of a glue to hold down that fiber. I mean, it probably would have stayed in place, but now I know that it's going to stay in place and it's a little more secure. And then, so once I've got the cover completely coated in the gel medium, I'm going to speed the drying process along by using my heat gun because, well, I am impatient, especially when I'm doing art. I don't want to stop and go do something while paint dries or while medium dries. It's just not the way I work well. And I'm just testing the area I know I'm going to write in to make sure at least that is dry to the touch and it's not going to ruin my pen. And then I can get back to work. Alright, here we go, all dry. Now, like I said, it was tying the bow that kind of gave me the idea for the title or message or sentiment for the cover. And it reminded me of the thing where they tell you to tie a string on your finger to help you remember. And since the cover had turned into this aged, patinaed, weathered look, and I had kind of a landscape going. I had the map pages, I had a rhino and a sea monster of some sort. It reminded me of like the big game hunters, but in a good, safe, we're not actually going to kill anything kind of way. And so the message I'm writing on here is don't forget to have adventures. Now, whether your adventures are in the great big outdoors or they're on your art table or maybe your dining room table, adventure is still adventure, and I think that adventure is a very good part of life. And that's kind of the book. Now, I did have this gold tassel that I think at work we had these left over from a program or something we did. It was a little longer, of course, than my little book here. So I just, knotted it at the base, and so I've got like an extra long tassel there, and it's all good. One final thing I did as I was adding the layers of gelatos to the cover, some bled off onto the exposed edge of that first envelope, and I liked it so much that I went through and I did all of the envelope edges throughout the book before I called it done. And it's just a little bit of gelatos, a little bit of water on your fingertips to smudge it out, and it dries so quickly you don't even have to get the heat gun after it. And there we go. There's my art adventure mixed media journal. Some people call these junk journals, I think. I think I've seen that online. But whatever you call it, I hope you'll give it a try. And I really hope you've enjoyed this project, this mixed media journal, featuring Faber-Castell, Texture Luxe, Pitt Artist pens, and gelatos. I'm Jennifer Vanderbeek with scrapsoflife.com. Please give this a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next project.